Mode.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's Tech Tuesday with CoreTech. Today I'm joined with Robert Lovelace, Solutions Architect for CoreTech. He'll be speaking today with Streamlining Systems Management with Application Repackaging. With that, I'll turn it over to Robert.
Good afternoon, everybody. So as Paula introduced me as CoreTech Solution Architect, I work with our managed service offerings, which our application or packaging offering is part of, as well as our cloud practice. Today, I'd like to get into talking through what application governance and application packaging or repackaging is, and how taking this approach and understanding this methodology can help streamline your Windows 10 servicing, as well as any projects that you may have that involve the desktop. As far as for today's webinar, definitely open to any and all questions as they come up. If you want to enter them into the chat, Paula can help field those for me. And hopefully I'd like to have a little dialogue here so that we can talk through some of these questions. And if there's anything at the very end, I have a slide that we can get into some of those questions. So to dive in, I want to look at the challenge. So what are the challenges that the businesses face, and how creating this environment, this application packaging methodology can help you overcome these challenges. What is application governance and what's involved? Then getting into specifically application packaging, and then talking about our CoreTech virtual application packaging offering that we do for our customers, and then into any questions that you may have and conclusions. So let's start with, why do we need it? What is application governance, and why do we need it? So application governance helps organizations in need of a way to take the burden off of their IT support team while providing an improved end user experience. The goal of application packaging and application governance, other areas that we'll talk about, are application rationalization and standardization. The goal is to create a simplified and consistent end user experience. No matter where that end user sits, especially in today's world with a very remote workforce, doesn't matter where they sit, they get the same experience, whether it's remote from home, in the office, in a finance department, or in a technical department. The look and feel of applications, how they receive applications within that desktop space is consistent. So we're ensuring consistent and stable, reliable standards, increasing the efficiency of software management by streamlining the software deployment along with any customizations needed, decreasing risks of business disruption, and helping reduce the ongoing administration and support costs. As we dive into application governance, I kind of want to touch to the three primary areas that focus on this application governance, and that's that application rationalization, or the process of cataloging and eliminating duplicate software. So if you look at your organization and you look at your application catalog, maybe, if you have one, depending on the maturity of your application environment, you may see a number of different Java applications or redistributable applications out there that are common prereqs for some of the core applications within the environment. And it's understanding and aligning those prereqs to applications and understanding what you need in the environment, and can we leverage a certain version of Java to eliminate the need for other versions of Java? Can we take an application across multiple departments and move to one standardized version of that application? There may be some licensing hurdles, but we can talk through those as an organization if we're willing to standardize our licensing and and versioning is important because what are we saving on the support side for that application? So that's talking through the application rationalization. The other piece to that that's similar is application standardization. Where it's different is it's taking a look at the function of the application, not necessarily what the application is and reducing versioning, but the function of that application. And to simplify it is, let's look at something like a snipping tool. You want to be able to take a screenshot on your computer. Now, where application standardization comes into play is it's saying, okay, our organization leverages the Windows 10 native clipping tool for screenshots. Or maybe our organization leverages GreenShot as our standard application for screenshots, and setting that across the board. So we say, if you need a tool that does this function, this is the tool you're using. We're not leaving it out there to business owners or departments of the business to say, we want this tool to do this task. It's saying, we want a tool that does this task, and the IT department letting them know what tool will perform that function for them. And then the final piece to this is application packaging. And that's the process of bundling together files, components, and information into a single executable for a consistent install of an application. The end goal for application packaging is for the application to install silently with some sort of enterprise app deployment tool. A lot of times we use SCCM, System Center Configuration Manager from Microsoft, and we can build this application inside of that tool for our customers to set up in a pull or push method of sending the applications to the end user's computer, whether it be on the network or off the network. So in that methodology, and the difference between a push and a pull is, in a push method, these are typically your core applications. These are applications that either are core for a department or for all employees, and we push these applications, we force them out to that endpoint. In a pull methodology is more of a, I might need access to this application, and you make it available for me. One example that I did for an organization, a simple example is the Fitbit application. They wanted their users to have access to that Fitbit application so they could sync the Fitbits. And we set this up as a pull because we didn't want to force it upon every endpoint, but for those that needed it, we wanted it available so they could pull it down to their endpoint. So developing that application catalog, understanding if the application is going to be a push or a pull model, developing those standards, and then reducing the complexity of your app catalog by rationalizing the versioning throughout, and eliminating duplicates is important. In the model I have here, we kind of take you through the reoccurring or the ongoing application lifecycle. So we start with our business model or our simulated business environment. And then we set that to our necessary model requirements in order to simulate this application in production. Maybe that's peripherals, maybe there's no peripherals. Maybe that's a VDI. Typically, we try to use VDI for this testing environment. It's easy to wipe and take snapshots and come back to. And then we need to understand our model application, so what we're looking at. So in this scenario, let's pretend that we're talking about a versioning upgrade. So we want to take the existing end user's environment with the existing core applications that we would expect to find within that end user's environment, and we would want to test the uninstall of the existing application and how the new application comes down. So we have our model business set up, our model requirements set up, and our model application set up. We want to make sure that the data that the application is using today, will work with the new version. So we'll test against that data if there's a database on the back end and make sure that there's no database improvements or changes that need to be done on the back end as part of this upgrade. We'll then work with a subject matter expert or an SME that uses this application today, and they will test against their workloads that they have with this newer version, so we understand any challenges or anything that we need to take into consideration when rolling this out into production. Once we have a sign-off from that SME, we can then look at deploying for production, and we understand that full process of upgrading this application and scheduling for deployment. Now, this is something that is an ongoing model. So there's really two types of application packaging that we look at. Typically, it's a ongoing and continued support, or a project-based app packaging. So the next piece that we'll get into is project-based packaging, and this is where the CoreTech virtual application packaging model really excels, because one of the greatest features of it is its ability to ramp up and ramp down based on need. So I have shown an example of typically where CoreTech owns this stage in the process, or the customer owns this stage in the process. So when we talk about our application listing, that's typically owned by the customer, and it is scoping out or understanding the applications that are a part of this scope or a part of this project. So I know I had mentioned earlier Windows 10 servicing, or maybe you're still working on going from Windows 7 to a Windows 10 environment. Maybe it's understanding and trying to get a better grasp of your applications that you have and packaging them to these new standards that you want to set up, creating that consistent end user experience. So when we talk about the app listing phase, again, understanding the scope, it's determining the applications required to be packaged, prioritizing the applications to be packaged. That's when we look at how many applications or how many users are using this application, and identifying an application as a tier 1 or a core application. Core applications are applications typically part of the image. Tier 1 applications are applications that are typically widespread across the environment that many users are using. And that's where we like to start. We want to start with being able to create that image, those core applications, as well as targeting the most users, the biggest bang for our buck. After we understand the applications included, we do an initial application assessment. This is where CoreTech begins to engage. The application assessment phase is basic testing of the media. So app listing gathers the application list and gives us the media, the vendor supplied media for the application. The assessment is where we have the application packager do a manual install to understand that, yes, this is the versioning that they told me I would be packaging, and yes, this installs manually the way that they told me they wanted it to install. From there, we move into the application packaging phase. So the assessment is manually going through the install. Application packaging phase is building out that MSI for an automated install, a zero-touch install for the end user, and again, targeting an enterprise application deployment tool like SCCM. Once the application is packaged and the application packager does a self-test, we can then move into unit testing. So that's an internal test that we do that is the self-test. So we do unit testing, that is a self-test of the application to make sure that it is installing and functioning to the best of the packager's ability. Sometimes we hit a roadblock at logins or licensing, and at that point, it is functioning up until the point that I can take it as far as possible. The next piece is moving it into a quality assurance test to make sure that any standards that your organization has, that this application and install is meeting those standards. From there, we go to user acceptance testing, where we actually leverage an an application coordinator from the CoreTech side or the customer resource, and we sit down with that SME and make sure that this application installs to their environment with zero touch or an understood minimal touch if touch is necessary, but at zero touch, and that it functions and behaves as they would expect in their production environment. To kind of give you a visual understanding of what this looks like, we have the first step at the top is, again, gathering that media, identifying those applications, and getting those install requirements of how this app should install and look, feel, and function. We get to understand if there's any peripherals necessary. Maybe there's a scanner or a printer that needs to be tested with, and we'll understand that so that as we go into the packaging process, we have all of those considerations as part of building this application. The next phase is the assessment phase, when we look at is it installing, and how is this an upgrade? Is this a net new application? So we get into understanding the application and the use case a little bit deeper. Then we get into the packaging phase, all while updating an application packaging database. So I highly recommend that whenever you're talking about putting the effort into creating this application catalog or application database, that we're documenting every step of the way and what some of those success factors are, or if we can understand where those failures are early in the process so that we can resolve them sooner than later. But we go through the application packaging, the unit testing or basic testing, user acceptance testing, and then off for distribution. So going through and talking to the virtual application packaging offer from CoreTech. So we've identified the process, we've identified the need and why we do this. Why does CoreTech, where does CoreTech come into play? So we've been doing application packaging for our customers since 2005, starting with XP to Windows 7 migrations. We've done steady state packaging for a number of organizations, and we would consider ourselves expert packaging engineers. We have partnerships with both Microsoft on the application deployment tool side, as well as the #1 application packaging standardized tool is Admin Studio and by Flexera. So we work with them very closely and in really coming together to build you a complete solution. And some of those real challenges that we see organizations face are around finding the proper resources and investing in the application packaging tools such as Flexera. The client server approach, complex logistics and bandwidth constraints. And where VAP comes in and really excels is our on-demand services. So we can flex up or flex down based on your needs. We can leverage our experience and our understanding of these project-based packaging or with the steady state packaging. We can do this in a fast, secure, remote ability, and we can have increased scalability. So what you can expect from our packaging offering is an application or a set of applications that meet your standards, that install with that zero or minimal touch by the end user to help you build that standard end user experience and environment, creating that desktop workspace that is a comfortable and it's a desktop that users know to expect. So you're protecting things like the actual desktop and understanding standards around where applications live. Do they live at the start menu? Are we doing it by vendors in the start menu? What does that look and feel? How do I find applications? Maybe you have a shared desktop where users don't always sit at the same computer, but they know when they go from computer to computer exactly where those applications are and what applications they would expect to be installed. At this point, I don't know, Paula, do we have any questions?
Yeah, during the session, a few have come in through the chat window, so thank you for that. Also, those of you who are on the line, if you would like to answer or ask a question, I can open up the lines and you can ask your question directly. But to start, what are some good tools for the application catalog database that you mentioned? What are some of the best practices out there for that?
Yeah, so we've leveraged, we have a SQL developer that has built out SQL databases for these app catalogs. The SQL databases can back into your SCCM database. There are some a little bit more basic. It really depends on what you're trying to get out of it. You can use the SCCM application catalog for this. If you're trying to get and understand maybe in that project of where these applications are in the phase of the application packaging process and how many users these applications will move to this new desired environment, you can get a lot of information in building that custom SQL database. But if you're looking at more of if the thought is more of a steady state, we just want to know what applications we have out there. The application catalog in SCCM is actually, it's fairly robust and it can definitely help you out.
Okay, great. Thank you, Robert. Here's another good one. What considerations or permissions do I need to think about when looking at BYOD?
Yeah, great question. So consideration would be understanding your organization from a mobile device management and how you want to manage the requirements you want to have on these devices. So this is where actually, I don't know if we have any sort of MDM webinar scheduled yet with our Microsoft practice, but you don't want to just push applications to a device that's not yours for a number of reasons. Security reasons, what type of data are we dealing with within this application? And what type of requirements are you enforcing on that device? And can you enforce requirements on that device that is not owned by your organization? If it is a BYOD environment where your organization owns these devices, but you're allowing people to go pick up their own device, we would have to look at how these applications behave and work on that endpoint, those different sets of endpoints. I know that when you talk about installing applications, there could be different driver packs for these applications that would behave and interact with those endpoints differently. So there are definitely some significant amount of considerations when talking about bring your own device environment. But I think one of the biggest ones is going to be the mobile device management. And are you pushing, in healthcare, are you pushing patient information potentially to this mobile device? And at that point, I would highly recommend alternative options and looking at presented applications, leveraging a Citrix environment maybe, where we can control where that data sits. But yeah, great question. Probably could do an entire webinar on mobile device management and application deployment or application governance with bring your own device.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we should add that into the schedule. Sounds like that's a big one. There's another question around legacy applications. What things do I need to consider if I have some very old applications that won't work?
Great question. So when you look at legacy applications, so there's a couple options out there. And one of the ones that is, I guess, two approaches. If you have a Citrix environment, leveraging Citrix to do a published app to virtualize essentially that application, you can leverage that environment for your outdated applications that are holding you back from getting users to Windows 10. Another option is, and it's something that we're starting to work with, is MSIX, and that containerizes applications that may conflict. So to kind of take legacy application, but also spin it into or including versionings of applications that collide and don't mesh well. So rather than having to spin up a different environment just so you can use this application, you can containerize applications similar to app virtualization, AppV, but you can leverage MSIX to containerize the application so that it thinks that it's in a different type of environment. So running locally on the endpoint within a container that doesn't necessarily have access or see other areas of that computer. So its registries keys that it's making changes to within the registry are only done within this container and not at the root of the computer. So there's a couple different options there, and it all depends on what technologies you have access to today. But to kind of summarize that, there's looking at app virtualization and MSIX, as well as leveraging depending on how old the application is, leveraging a Citrix environment for a published application.
All right, thanks. This one's interesting. So this is very complicated. How do I make an ROI calculation for my leadership?
Yeah, that can be complicated. I'd love to work with you and help you out to understand that. So when we look at, it depends on how messy the environment is today and to the level of management that you guys have within your applications today. So if we're looking at a dirty environment, I'm going to call it an unmanaged dirty environment, and we don't really know what's out there. Each business unit individually licenses their applications and what they need, and they manage their applications. If we standardize applications, we normally can get a discount on bulk licensing, and even considering licensing the organization depending on the quantity of users using this type of application, rather than having each business unit purchase this licensing on their own. From a streamlining IT, we no longer need to guess and learn these new applications, what's out there, or have users send their laptops in, or have end user field support working directly with the end user. We can treat laptops more like, hope this isn't a bad analogy, but more like cattle than pets. So if it's acting up, send it to me, I'm sending you a new one. You're not married to this device, and I can send you a new one very quickly and image it with your applications very seamlessly, versus you having very specific applications and me needing to understand what applications you have and what applications you use, and getting you an image or a device with those same applications. So we can very streamline, we can fix issues by just giving new devices and re-imaging those devices for the next user that needs help. So that is an option. There's streamlining ways, but again, understanding your environment a little bit better. Feel free to send me an email afterwards, and we can dive into this. My email address is robert.lovelace@cortech.com, and we can get into your specific use case and understand where we can really identify that return on investment.
Outstanding. Thank you, Robert. That was wonderful. For those of you there on the line, you will receive an email after this session with a link to the recording. As always, you may go to www.cortech.com/events to sign up for additional events or to get recordings of this event. Next week, we will be talking about Microsoft Endpoint Manager with Intune and co-management. So that would be a really great add-on to this session. Thank you so much for your attention, and have a great day.
Thank you.